Alright, so the first two in our warm-up, it looks like we're supposed to have two answers. We're going to say complementary, supplementary, or neither, and then we're going to say adjacent or non-adjacent. So number one, is it complementary, supplementary, or neither? Complementary, why? Yeah, when you add those two numbers together, you get 90 degrees. Good. Now, are they adjacent or non-adjacent? Adjacent, good. Remember, adjacent means they share a side and a vertex. Alright, number two. When you add them together, what do you get? 178. Is there anything special about the number 178? No, so that's a neither. And are they adjacent or non-adjacent? Non-adjacent. Good. Wonderful. Any questions on the first two? Alright, number three, how would I start that? Subtract 52. Subtract 52. What's 90 minus 52? 38, very good. And then how would you solve from there? Divide by 2. So what's x equal? 19, very good. Questions on 3. Alright, number 4 is just a one-stepper. What do you guys do? Divide by 6, divide by 6. What's 180 divided by 6? 30, very good. Alright, number 5, what do you think? Subtract 24. Subtract 24. So you get 11x equals... Hmm? 66, good. And then divide both sides by that 11, and what do you get for x? 6, very good. And the last one on our warm-up, do the parentheses mean anything? What do I need to do with those? Parentheses always make me want to distribute. You distribute when something is being multiplied by the entire parentheses. Is there anything being multiplied by that parentheses? No. Well, technically there's like a 1 out here, but you don't really need to worry about that, okay? There's nothing you can distribute. So the parentheses are just kind of there to throw you off on this one. The best way to start this one is to just start combining like terms. So what's 2x plus 1x? So we have 3x minus 12 equals 90. What would you do next? Add 12 to both sides. So I'm going to have 3x equals 102. Divide both sides by the 3, and what do you get for x? 34, good. What questions do you guys have?
You got notes today?
Yes. Alright, you do not need to write this down. It's been a while since we did 3.1. We didn't get to it on Friday. We actually had the weekend then, so it's been about 4 days since you've seen this stuff. So I just wanted to talk it over. So again, you don't need to write this down. You don't need to draw it. Just listen and answer the questions. So the first thing they want to know is, how is AD related to BC? Do they appear to be parallel, perpendicular, or skew? A, D, and BC are parallel. Good. Or at least they appear to be parallel. So instead of writing out the word parallel, I'm just going to use the symbol. Alright, next we want BC and CD. those appear to be BC, CD. Parallel, perpendicular, skew. Well, what's this? That's a right angle. So what are they? Perpendicular. Good. If they form a right angle, they are perpendicular. Next we have BC and AE. Skew. They're not on the same plane, and they will not intersect. Good. No fancy symbol for skew, just write out the word skew. Number 4, name a line that appears to be parallel to AB. So here's AB. What appears to be parallel to AB? DC. Good. And does plane ABC, so the gray plane, appear to be perpendicular to AD, line AD? So does that line appear to be perpendicular to the plane? Meaning, does that line form right angle with the plane? Does that appear to be what's happening here? I think so. Yeah, it looks like a table, right? The legs of a table would meet the table at a right angle, so this would be a yes. Any questions? Alright, so as you can see on the board, today we are doing section 3.2. It's all about perpendicular lines. So, you are going to need to write down these 4 theorems about perpendicular lines. And then I will explain what each of them means after I know you have them all down. But there are the numbers. So, theorem 3.1 says that all right angles are congruent. So if you have like angle 1, and I tell you it's a right angle, and you have an angle over here called angle 2, and I say it's a right angle, you now know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. That's what this theorem is stating. All right angles are congruent. Any questions? Theorem 3.2 says that if 2 lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form 4 right angles. So typically when you see 2 lines and they're perpendicular, just one of them is labeled as a right angle, they're actually all right angles. That's what theorem 3.2 says. Alright, the next theorem, theorem 3.3 says if 2 lines intersect to form adjacent congruent angles, then the lines are perpendicular. So if you have 2 lines that cross like this, and then you're told that 2 of them are congruent, well, that's basically like saying, hey, you have this linear pair, right? Since it's a straight line, when you put them together, you have a linear pair, and they're both the same. So you have 2 angles that add to 180 and they're both the same. Well, the only way that would be true is if this one was 90 degrees and this one was 90 degrees. So that's what that one is saying. And then the last one, 3.4, says if 2 sides of adjacent acute angles are perpendicular, then the angles are complementary. This one is pretty straightforward. We've been looking at ones like this for a while. If you have 2 acute angles, and do you see how the sides of these angles form a right angle? That means that if you added those together, you'd get 90. So let's just call this one angle 1 and angle 2. So the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 would have to be 90. We've looked at a lot of them like that already. I know you had a few on your last quiz where I gave you that it was a right angle and you would add them together to find the x part. But here's just the theorem to back you up. Any questions on the 4 theorems that we will be talking about today? So I want you to draw the diagram that you see. Make sure that you label which are perpendicular. So I know that A and C are perpendicular. And I know that B and D are perpendicular. I do not know anything about what's going on over here or what's going on over here. So don't go marking up over here. We don't know. Not sure. But this is a right angle and this is a right angle. And then I also want you to just write the question down. So like angle 1 congruent to angle 2, angle 2 congruent to angle 3, angle 3 congruent to angle 4. And then that's what we will answer, these questions. Alright, so if I know that these are perpendicular, I basically know, because of that second theorem, that those are all right angles, right? And since D and B are perpendicular, these are all right angles. Again, that was the second theorem we looked at in the last slide. So I'm going to go ahead and just label all the ones I know. I don't know anything about angle 4 or any of those things in the upper right intersection. I just know the ones I labeled. Any questions so far? Now, do we know that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent? Yes, they're both 90 degrees. All 90-degree angles are congruent. That was the first theorem on the last slide. 2 and 3, do we know that 2 and 3 are congruent? 2 is here, 3 is here. How do you know that those are congruent? They're both right angles. All right angles are congruent. Good. Do we know that 3 and 4 are congruent? Why do you think that? Three and 4, what do you think? Do we know that these are perpendicular? Were we given anything about C and B? No. So do we know that this is 90 degrees? No. So right here, we don't know that it's false, but we do know that there's not enough information given to us right now. Now, on your homework, it's going to say this, explain your reasoning. You don't need to explain your reasoning. I know what your reasoning is. We all know the same 4 theorems. So just go ahead and say, if it's true, put true. If you're not sure because there's not enough information, put not enough information. Any questions on this? All right, here is example 2. So again, I want you to draw the diagram. You don't need to write out all the directions, but I would like you to write the 4 examples, what the problem is, and then we'll go ahead and discuss them. All right, as you're drawing the diagram, I'm going to go ahead and label all the angles I know. So if K and L are perpendicular, I know that all of these are right angles. And if K and N are perpendicular, all of these are right angles. I do not know anything about line M as it relates to line K, so I can't label angle 5 as anything special. Any questions so far? All right, angle 1 and angle 2, are those congruent or not enough information? 1 is here, it's a right angle. 2 is here, it's a right angle. Are they congruent?
Yes.
Yes. 2 and 3, are these congruent? Yes. Both right angles. 3 and 4, are those congruent? Yes, they are both right angles. 4 and 5, are those congruent?
No.
No, why not? We don't know if 5 is or is not a right angle. Maybe it is, they just didn't tell us. Appears that it's not, but either way, there is not enough information to say that they are congruent. You do not need to worry about explaining, just say true or not enough information. What are your questions on example 2? Alright, here is example 3 and example 4. I don't want you to write down the entire statement. A lot of it you can just put by drawing the diagram. I do want you to write this, though, as the question for example 3, and this part right here as the question for example 4, and then draw the diagrams. Make sure you label these as being congruent and these as being congruent. Give you a couple minutes. Alright, so this goes back to the third theorem we talked about at the beginning of today's lesson. We have two lines that intersect, and two of the angles formed are given to us as being congruent. Well, we know that these are a linear pair, right? They should add to give me what? They form a straight line when you put them together. So they should add to give me 180. Okay, so they add to give you 180, and they're equal to one another. So you need to figure out what half of 180 is. What's half of 180? Half of 180 is? No. 180 divided, what's 18 divided by 2? 9, put a 0 on the end. These are both 90-degree angles. If they are 90-degree angles, are they, or is that enough information to say that these two lines are perpendicular? Yes, they are perpendicular. 90-degree angles are right angles. So if these are both right angles, then yes, these lines must be perpendicular. And again, this is straight from that third theorem, that if two lines intersect to form some angles, and you know that two of those angles are congruent, they both must be 90, because half of 180 is 90. If one of them is 90, they're all 90. And the lines are perpendicular. Any questions? Alright, same thing down here. So we have two lines that are intersecting. And I'm given that these angles up top are congruent. When you add them together, you should get two lines that form a straight, or two angles that form a straight line. When you add them together, you should always get 180. And they're congruent. If they're both congruent, they must be 90 degrees. So I'm going to label these as right angles. If those are both 90 degrees, we know that the lines are perpendicular, right? And how many right angles are formed when lines are perpendicular? 4. So that means this is a right angle and this is a right angle. The question is asking us is GPJ a right angle. So is this one a right angle? Yeah, they're all right angles, right? So just a simple yes is fine by me. Here is our last example of today, and this is one that you've seen before, so this should not be anything new. The only thing now is you know a theorem to back yourself up. This is the fourth theorem that we talked about today. So I know that those are both acute angles. They come together to form an angle. So how should I set this up? Any ideas how I should start this? What does this box mean? Right angle. What's the measure of a right angle? 90. So when I put 20 together with 6x plus 4, what should I get? You just said it. 90. Great. So that's the equation that I need to solve for this problem. The 20 and the 4 are on the same side of the equal sign, so I can combine like terms. So I have 6x plus the 24 when I added the 20 and the 4 equals 90. Then what? Subtract the 24. So we have 6x equals 66, it looks like. Then what? Divide both sides by 6, so x equals 11. What are your questions on this? Alright, you do have homework tonight. I'll go ahead and pass that out. It will be due at the beginning of class tomorrow.